Karen Holt's voice was sharp and absolute. You can't park that here. That commercial vehicle violates HOA covenants. Move it immediately, or I'm calling the police. Like 10 minutes in my driveway could erase what state statute had protected for decades. Like her clipboard and threats could override the fact that my county-issued vehicle was explicitly exempt from the rule she was quoting. What she didn't know: I was the police chief she just threatened to call. I had documentation of every bogus fine in the contract paying her company 75% of all violations she imposed. This wasn't legitimate enforcement or community protection. 8 years of harassment targeting working families. $47,000 in fines collected from people who couldn't afford lawyers. A compliance officer who'd built a $35,000 revenue stream weaponizing rules she knew were illegal. Karen made the mistake every small-time tyrant makes, assuming the quiet neighbor with the government truck would be too intimidated to read the statute or too tired to document her calling. 911 over what was parked in my driveway. She assumed wrong. Over 18 months, I watched Karen Holt discover what happens when you profit from illegal fines. Target a police chief without realizing it. Tell a state auditor that your interpretation overrides the law. This is the story of how an HOA compliance officer lost her company, her position, and $47,000 in restitution because she couldn't answer one question the judge asked. Did homeowners know you profited from their fines? Not because I wanted revenge. Because accountability doesn't care about clipboards or years of unchecked authority. It cares about documentation. And what happens when you abuse power in front of someone trained to build cases? But let me start from the beginning. Before we dive into, I'd love to know where you're listening from today. And don't forget to hit the like and subscribe buttons for more interesting stories just like this. The tire tracks in my new driveway still looked too clean to be real. The concrete was that pale, almost chalky gray that only exists for a few weeks after a pour. My boxes were stacked along the garage wall. My couch was still wrapped in moving blankets. And the air inside the house smelled like fresh paint and cardboard. Outside, the world smelled like cut grass and hot asphalt.
At least.
Maplewood Heights was quiet too. Quiet for a Saturday evening. Identical mailboxes. Identical shrubs. Identical porch lights flicking on one by one as the sun slid behind the tree line. I killed the engine of the department-issued pickup and sat there for a second, hand still. On the wheel, 14 hours. One major traffic fatality, 2 domestic calls, a stolen car, and a patrol schedule that refused to line up with the budget. First week as chief, and the job already felt like juggling knives. I stared at the steering wheel and thought, just for a moment, what if I slept here? Seat back, jacket over my face, no one needing anything for 8 hours. Then my lower back protested. My knee twinged. When reality came back in, I climbed out, every joint reminding me I was 42, not 25. The evening air hit my face warm, humid, carrying a faint whiff of someone's grill and the chemical sweetness of freshly fertilized lawns. The truck door shut with a solid thump. The sound echoed off the row of houses like a gunshot in a church. The truck wasn't marked. Not really. No light bar, no police stenciled down the side. It's just a small county seal on the driver's door and a subtle antenna mounted near the rear. Government issue silver. Functional, not flashy. Technically it was. Supposed to be garaged at my house when I was off duty. That was part of the contract. On-call meant on-call. I grabbed my duty bag from the passenger seat, slung it over my shoulder, and took in the view of my new street. Maplewood Heights. 92 homes, community park, walking trail, HOA, with a reputation for being strict. I'd heard that word 3 times from the realtor and 2 more when I'd signed the closing papers. Strict, but it keeps things nice, they'd said with tight, polite smiles. I'd read the covenants. No grass over 4 inches. No sheds without approval. No trash cans visible from the street. No commercial vehicles parked overnight, I'd noticed. That clause. I'd also noticed the state statute that made HOA covenants unenforceable against government vehicles. The law didn't care what the HOA wanted if it conflicted with public duties. Still, I'd planned to be a good neighbor, keep a low profile, ease in. I hadn't planned on getting into a fight. My first night. She came out of her house like a heat-seeking missile. I hadn't even shut the tailgate when I saw her 3 doors down, standing on her porch in a coordinated tracksuit the color of wet concrete. Short blonde hair, aggressively styled. Clipboard in one hand, phone in the other. She saw the truck. Froze, narrowed her eyes behind thick-framed glasses. Here we go, I thought. She came down her porch steps fast, sneakers slapping the concrete. Walked straight down the sidewalk then. Cut across my yard without hesitation, trampling the skinny line of newly planted grass the landscapers had just put in. "Excuse me," she snapped, before I could even say hello. "Can't park that here." I set my duty bag down on the driveway. "Evening. That commercial vehicle violates HOA covenants," she said, jabbing her clipboard in the direction of my truck. "Move it immediately." Her voice had the grating edge of someone who'd spent years being obeyed and didn't know what to do when people hesitated. "It's not a commercial vehicle," I said. "It's a government vehicle. I don't care what you call it. It's a truck with signage. Section 7.4 of the Maplewood Heights Covenants clearly states, no commercial vehicles may be parked in driveways or on streets overnight." She recited it like scripture. "It's my driveway," I said. Kept my tone even, my posture relaxed. "And it's legal." "I don't care whose driveway it is," she shot back. "Rules are rules. Move it or I'm calling the police." That almost made me laugh. Almost instead, I took a breath, felt the weight of the day in my legs, the desire to avoid this conversation at all costs. "I just moved in," I said. "I've been on duty since 5 this morning. Can we talk about this? Tomorrow when I'm not standing here in my uniform with my brain half asleep?" She looked me up and down then, like she was really seeing me for the first time. Dark blue uniform pants, department polo with the county seal, duty belt stripped down to off-duty essentials. Badge clipped at my waist. If it registered, she didn't. "Show it. This is unacceptable," she said, louder now. "You can park that thing at the station or in your garage or wherever, but you will not junk up our neighborhood with it." She lifted her phone. "Last chance. Move it now." "Ma'am," I said, feeling my patience fray at the edges. "There's a state statute that exempts government vehicles from HOA restrictions. I'm not violating anything. You don't make the rules here," she snapped. "The HOA does. I'm the compliance officer, and I am telling you, move that truck." I'd had people scream in my face during domestic calls. I'd had drunk drivers spit on my boots. I'd had grieving parents collapse against my chest when I brought bad news to their door. This woman, in her matching tracksuit and white sneakers, was somehow more exhausting than all of them. "I am not having this argument in my driveway after a 14-hour shift," I said. "I'm happy to discuss the law with you tomorrow. Right now I'm going inside." Her eyes went wide, like I'd slapped her. "No," she barked. "No, that is not how this works. You don't get to just ignore me." She hit a button on her phone. "Fine, I'm calling 911. There was a part of me tired, sarcastic, deeply done with the day that wanted to let her, so I did. She put the phone to her ear. "Yes, I'd like to report a violation," she said when the call picked up. "There's a commercial truck parked illegally in my neighborhood, in direct violation of our HOA covenants. I need an officer dispatched immediately." I heard the dispatcher's voice faintly through the speaker. The cadence was familiar. I knew every voice in that room. "Ma'am, is this a criminal emergency?" the dispatcher asked. "Or is this an HOA issue?" "This is a safety issue," the woman snapped. "Those kinds of vehicles attract crime. It's lowering our property values. Send someone now." The dispatcher asked for the address. She rattled mine off, each number crisp with indignation. There was a pause on the other end. I could picture it. The dispatcher swiveling in his chair, looking at the CAD screen, seeing my name attached to that address. The new chief. The one they'd just programmed into the system last week. The dispatcher said carefully. "Can you describe the vehicle?" "It's a big silver pickup with some kind of county logo slapped on the side. It's been parked there for at least 5 minutes." Another pause. "Ma'am," the dispatcher said, "can you tell me exactly what the emergency is?" "I just told you. It's an illegal commercial vehicle in a residential neighborhood. Are you refusing to send someone?" That was enough. "Ma'am," I said, holding out my hand. "Let me talk to him." She jerked the phone away. "I'm speaking to the police," she said. "This doesn't involve you. It very much involves me," I said. "That's my radio room you're tying up." She blinked. Confusion flickered across her face. I stepped closer, gently but firmly took the phone from her grip. She let it go more from surprise than consent. "This is Chief Martinez," I said into the receiver. "False 911 call. Cancel the response." There was a beat of silence. Then the dispatcher exhaled a laugh he probably shouldn't have. "Yes, Chief. Canceling now." "Want me to log it?" "Log it as a misuse of emergency services linked to an HOA complaint," I said. "We'll deal with it internally." "Copy that. Welcome home, by the way. Thanks." I ended the call and handed the phone back. The woman, Karen, I would later learn, was staring at me like I'd pulled off a mask and revealed a different species. "Chief," she repeated. "Chief of what?" "Police," I said. "County Police Department." Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. Her face went from flushed red to a kind of unnerving pale. You can't," she stammered. "That this has nothing to do with your job." "Called 911 because you didn't like what was parked in my driveway," I said. Kept my voice calm even. "That's not what 911 is for." "You're abusing your position," she said, voice climbing again now that the first shock had worn off. "Canceling calls? Intimidating residents?" "I canceled a false call," I said. No one was in danger. No crime was occurring. You don't get an emergency response because you don't like the look of a truck. Her eyes narrowed. I could see the mental gears turning, recalibrating. I was no longer a new neighbor with a truck. I was problem to be managed with a different strategy. "This isn't over," she said finally. Her voice had gone cold. "Just because you're who you are doesn't mean you get to ignore community standards. I will be filing a formal complaint with the HOA and with the county if necessary." "You're free to file anything you like," I said. "And I'm free to park my legally exempt vehicle in my own driveway." She stared at me 1 second longer, like she wanted to say something else. Then she turned on her heel and marched back across my grass, phone clutched in a white-knuckled fist. I watched her go. My exhaustion had shifted into something sharper annoyance, threaded with a warning hum in my gut. I'd been chief for less than a week. I'd just moved into the house. The last thing I wanted was a war with the HOA, but I'd seen that look before. On traffic stops, on neighborhood disputes, on the faces of people who believed rules applied to everyone but them. It was the look of someone who didn't back down when they were wrong, who doubled down. Instead, the certified letter was waiting in my mailbox the next afternoon, white envelope. Return address, Maplewood Heights Homeowners Association. A new address printed in neat black type. A small label on the corner, certified signature required. I signed for it more out of professional habit than anything else. Took it inside. Set my coffee mug down beside it on the kitchen counter that still smelled faintly of laminate adhesive. For a second, I considered leaving it unopened until after my shift. Pretend for just a few more hours. That home was a place without paperwork. Then I thought about the 911 call. About her threat. This isn't over. I opened it. The paper inside was heavy, with a faux embossed HOA logo at the top. The body text was exactly what I'd expected and somehow worse. "Dear homeowner," it began. "As if I didn't have a name, it has come to our attention that a commercial vehicle has been parked in the driveway of your property in direct violation of Maplewood Heights Covenant. 7.4. Commercial vehicles of any kind are strictly prohibited from overnight parking in driveways or on streets. You are hereby notified of the following violation. Commercial vehicle observed parked in driveway on date. 1900 hours commercial vehicle observed parked in driveway on date. 730 hours. You are required to remove said vehicle from the property by 2,200 hours tonight. Failure to comply will result in a fine of $500, with additional fines of $100 per day until compliance is achieved. Repeated violations may result in legal action, including, but not limited to, liens against your property. Sincerely, Karen Holt, Compliance Officer, Maplewood Heights, HOA. I read it twice. Then a third time. Everything about it, the tone, the threats. The assumption of authority was designed to make a normal person panic. Most people, I knew they'd scramble to find alternative parking. They'd stress over fines and liens and legal fees. They'd resent their own home before they ever resented the HOA. I put the letter down next to my coffee, looked out the front window where my truck sat quietly in the driveway, sunlight glinting off the county seal. I'm the first female police chief this county has ever had, I thought. I've negotiated with armed suspects. I've stood in front of angry crowds. I've told parents their child isn't coming home, and this woman thinks a form letter is going to scare me. The funny thing was, she didn't know who I was when she wrote it. She knew now, and she sent it. Anyway, that told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't about a truck. This was about control, and if there's one thing I understand better than most, it's what happens when someone abuses power on the assumption no one will push back. I picked the letter up again, smoothed the crease down the middle. Then I opened my laptop, pulled up the state statutes, and started a new folder. Maplewood Heights DOCUM, in tie to win. Karen wanted to play by the rules. We were going to play by all of them. Every line, every clause, every law over her law, because she thought she was calling the police on a neighbor with a truck. She hadn't realized yet she'd called the police on the police chief, and that was a mistake you only get to make once. The Maplewood Heights covenants read like they'd been written by someone who'd never had a real problem in their life. I sat at my kitchen table that night with the thick binder open, yellow highlighter in hand, the HOA letter beside my coffee cup. Outside, my truck sat quietly in the driveway under the streetlight, as harmless as a sleeping dog. Section 7.4. No commercial vehicles, including but not limited to vehicles with signage, ladder racks, toolboxes, or business branding. May be parked in driveways or on streets overnight. On its face, my truck fit that description. County seal on the door, radio antenna, standard issue. Then I pulled up the state statutes on my laptop. There it was. Exactly where I remembered it from the last briefing I'd given my officers. A line in the property code, stating that homeowner associations could not restrict the parking of government vehicles assigned to public safety personnel at their residences, firefighters, EMTs, police. My truck wasn't a commercial vehicle. It was a government vehicle, explicitly exempt from the very rule Karen was swinging around like a sword. I printed the statute, highlighted the relevant section, and drafted my response. I kept it professional. Dear Ms. Holt, I wrote, thank you for your letter dated date regarding an alleged commercial vehicle violation at my residence. The vehicle in question is a county-owned law enforcement vehicle assigned to me in my capacity as chief of police. Under state statute number 5, government vehicles assigned to public safety personnel are exempt from HOA commercial vehicle restrictions. Accordingly, no covenant violation has occurred, and the fines referenced in your letter are not legally enforceable. Please update your records to reflect that my vehicle is a government vehicle covered by state exemption. Sincerely, Chief Elena Martinez. I printed it, signed it with the same hand I used to sign arrest warrants, and dropped it in the HOA's little locked mailbox at the entrance to the subdivision. On my way to work the next morning, for about 8 hours, I let myself believe that might be the end of it. The second letter arrived 3 days later. Same embossed logo, same heavy paper. The tone had changed. Dear homeowner, it began again, as if I hadn't signed my last letter with rank and name. Your attempt to claim exemption from community standards is denied. I actually laughed at that. Denied, like I'd submitted a permission slip she got to stamp, yes or no. Maplewood Heights, covenants apply equally to all residents. Without exception, the letter continued. Your vehicle remains in violation of covenant. 7.4. You are required to remove it from your driveway immediately and refrain from parking it on any community street. Failure to comply will result in fines of $500 per day. Beginning on date, continued non-compliance may result in legal action, including liens against your property. You are not above the rules. Sincerely, Karen, Holt Compliance Officer. I set the letter down. The amusement drained out of me, replaced by something colder. She'd read my response. She'd seen the statute, and she'd decided her rules outranked state law. This wasn't ignorance. This was arrogance. I took a walk that night just to clear my head. Maplewood Heights was pretty in that manufactured way. New subdivisions are. Young trees that would eventually provide real shade, perfectly edged lawns. The faint, constant hum of air conditioning units behind houses. I noticed little things now that I hadn't clocked during Mauvin. 3 different service vans parked in driveways, plumbing, pest control, HVAC, all of them spotless, logoed. Clearly work vehicles. 2 had magnetic signs slapped on the doors, the kind you can peel off. One didn't. I wondered if they'd gotten letters, or if Karen only saw violations when she wanted to. When I turned onto my street, I saw where she lived. 3rd house down, on the opposite side. American flag on a fixed-angle pole, seasonal wreath on the door, flower beds lined up like soldiers. Her garage door was open a crack, enough to see a neat row of plastic storage bins, labeled, enough to see a folding table stacked with binders. She'd been doing this a long time. The next morning, I got confirmation. She's been compliance officer for 8 years. My neighbor across the street told me quietly when she caught me getting the mail. She was mid-30s, yoga pants, and an oversized college sweatshirt, hair in a messy bun. Welcome to the neighborhood, by the way. Thanks, I said. You're Jen, 27B. She shifted from foot to foot, eyes flicking toward Karen's house like she was afraid the woman could hear us through walls. Word travels fast. She called 911 on you. Seems that way. Jen grimaced. She's done that before. Not 911, but letters, threats, all that. She's run off 3 families since I moved in. Run off? Fines, violations, making their lives hell until they sold. Jen's jaw clenched. I'm a florist. I had my delivery van parked in the driveway overnight for a week when I was redoing the garage. She'll fine me $2,000. Said it was a commercial vehicle. I couldn't afford to fight her. I just paid and started parking it at the shop. Did she ever cite the board members? I asked. Jen gave a humorless little laugh. No. Funny how their boats, golf carts, and side businesses are always in compliance. Filed that away. Bob introduced himself that afternoon. I found him leaning on the hood of his faded blue sedan. Watching as I unloaded a box of kitchen stuff from the truck, Chief Martinez. He called out. I stiffened automatically, then relaxed. Word really did travel fast. Okay, that's me, I said. And you are? Bob Harris. House on the corner, end of the street, 70s, weathered face, Vietnam vet hat that had seen better days. Figured I'd say welcome before Karen tries to convince you I'm a public menace. Too late, I said. She's already tried, he chuckled. She got you for the truck, huh? She's trying. State law says otherwise. State law didn't help me much, he said. I've got a VA medical transport van. Big white boxy thing, hospital logo on the side. Bring guys to appointments 3 times a week. I know the type, I said. Good work. She cited me for it, he said. Called it a commercial vehicle. Sent pictures to the board, said it made the neighborhood look bad. What did you do? What could I do? Fought it as much as I could. Wrote letters. Showed Em my VA papers. She wouldn't budge. Fined me $800. Said she'd lien my house if I didn't pay. Did you? Yeah, his mouth twisted around the word. I'm on a fixed income. Couldn't afford a lawyer? Cheaper to pay the tyrant and park it at the church down the road? I felt a familiar heat rise in my chest. Not the sharp burn of anger. The slow, steady one that comes from watching someone get pushed around because they don't know they have a choice. How many times has she done that? I asked. Bob shrugged. Lost count. Single mom on Willow got it bad. Guy with the pest control business? Coupled with the food truck. Anybody who doesn't fit her picture of refined community aesthetic? Why hasn't anyone pushed back? I asked. Gone legal? Most folks don't know how, he said. She sends letters on fancy paper, throws around words like lien and foreclosure, and people panic. Not everyone reads statutes for fun. I don't read them for fun, I said. I read them so I can sleep at night. He gave me a long, assessing look. You gonna be different? I'm not here to start a war, I said. But I'm not here to roll over either, he smiled then. Good about time someone with a badge parked on this street if Karen wanted documentation. I was going to give her documentation. I bought a cheap spiral notebook and put it in a basket by the front door. Every time I left or came home, I noted the date, time, and whether the truck was in the driveway. I started snapping a photo of the truck each evening and each morning, time-stamped. It felt ridiculous. But I'd built enough cases to know that ridiculous documentation wins in court. It didn't take long for her to reveal her own routine every morning around 8:15. She'd walk her little white dog down our side of the street. Every single time, she'd pause in front of my house, pull out her phone, and take multiple photos of my truck. Front, side, plate. Sometimes she'd zoom in on the county seal. On day 4, I watched from my front window as she took the photos, then scribbled furiously on her clipboard. Violation reports. I'd recognize that kind of obsessive note-taking anywhere, if she noticed my curtains move. She didn't show it. She filed her first complaint with the county a week later. Code enforcement. Not 911. The notice arrived in a plain envelope from the Department of Community Development. We have received a complaint alleging an illegal home business being operated at your residence, it read. An inspector will visit your property on date to verify compliance. I called the number on the letter. Community Development. This is Mark. This is Chief Martinez, I said. I think you've got an interesting complaint on your desk. Oh, there was a pause. At Maplewood Heights. That's the one, he groaned. Let me guess. HOA says your truck means you're operating a business from home. Bingo. I'll be out there Tuesday, he said. But between you and me, this is nonsense. Mark showed up right on time. Mid-40s, county polo, clipboard in hand, amused look on his face. Nice place, he said, looking around. Looks extremely non-commercial. I sell absolutely nothing out of this house, I said. Unless you count candy to trick-or-treaters, we walked the property anyway. He checked the garage, glanced into the kitchen, looked at the truck. I'm supposed to verify there aren't any signs of a retail operation, he said. According to the complaint, constant police activity is creating a nuisance and indicates an illegal business. I looked around at my very quiet driveway. I've had exactly one patrol car visit. To drop off a housewarming plant. Mark snorted. I'll close this out as unfounded. For the 4th time this year from Maplewood Heights, by the way. 4th. Different houses. Same complainant name. Tapped his clipboard. She's got a pattern. Can you share that? I asked. He hesitated, then shrugged. Public records. You can request the complaint log. Might be educational. The 3rd letter from the HOA landed 2 days after Mark's inspection. Final notice. The header screamed. Dear homeowner, it said. Because apparently acknowledging my name was a bridge too far, despite multiple notices, you continue to keep a commercial vehicle in your driveway in direct violation of Covenant 7.4. As of today, you have accrued fines totaling $1,500. Failure to pay within 30 days will result in a lien being filed against your property. Continued refusal to comply may result in legal action up to and including foreclosure proceedings. You have left us no choice. Sincerely, Karen Holt, Compliance Officer. I read it once, then put it down. My pulse didn't even tick up this time. I was past fear and firmly in the taking notes for later phase. At roll call the next morning, my sergeant caught me in the hallway. You look tired, Chief, he said. Everything okay? New house, new neighbors, same human behavior, I said. The HOA compliance officer has decided my truck is the hill she's going to die on. He raised an eyebrow. Need me to have a word? I appreciate it, I said.
Ow.
Not yet. With all due respect, you could end this in one phone call, he said. People tend to back off when the chief tells them to back off. That's exactly why I'm not doing it, I said. If I lean on my title, this stays personal. If I let her keep pushing, this becomes systemic. He frowned. Chief, I want to see how far she'll go, I said quietly. And I want documentation when we get there. He studied me for a second, then nodded. You playing chess again? Checkers bores me, I said. He chuckled and walked off. I went back to my office and started filling out a public records request. The county made it easy. Online form, simple fields. All code enforcement complaints originating from Maplewood Heights HOA in the last 3 years. All complainant names associated with those reports. It took a week to get the file. I opened it at my kitchen table on a Friday night. A plate of microwaved, leftovers forgotten beside my laptop. Spreadsheet, 127 entries. Complainant name on nearly every one. Karen Holt. Alleged violations. Commercial vehicle parking. Noise complaints. Lawn height. Unsightly materials. Unapproved modifications. Illegal business operations. Properties. 25 different addresses. Many repeated. Some, I recognize Bob's Corner Lot. The florist's house. A street I knew from patrol as the neighborhood that calls a lot. Disposition column. Almost everyone marked unfounded or no violation observed. Total fines issued by the HOA for those violations in the same time period. That wasn't on the county spreadsheet, but there was another set of records I could request. HOAs have to file financial reports with the state. Budget line items. Income categories. Fines or income. I filed another request. It took 2 weeks this time. When the numbers landed on my screen, even I had to sit back. $40,000. That's how much. Maplewood Heights had collected in fines over 3 years. I scrolled through the breakdown. Compliance penalties listed as a revenue stream. No detail on who paid what, but it was there. $40,000 squeezed out of people for parking work vans, for leaving trash cans out an extra day, for planting the wrong kind of shrub, all of it overseen by a woman who had called 911 because she didn't like the truck in my driveway. All of it funneled through an account she controlled as compliance officer. I took a screenshot, saved the files, printed hard copies. Then I opened a new document and typed a heading in all caps. Karen Holt, pattern of harassment and financial Guyan. The harassment campaign wasn't. It's about aesthetics. It was a business model. And she just tried to run it on the wrong person. The state. Well, handbook was dry reading. But I'd spent enough nights buried in penal codes to know that somewhere in the tedium there's always a knife. I printed the HOA section from the state property code, grabbed a red pen, and started marking it up at my kitchen table. Maplewood Heights Covenants binder sat open beside it. Karen's letters stacked like exhibits in a case file, one by one. The conflicts lit up. State law. A property owners association may not enforce a restrictive covenant that prohibits the parking of a law enforcement, emergency services, or other government vehicle assigned to the property owner for official duties. Covenants. No commercial vehicles, including vehicles with signage or government insignia, may be parked in driveways or on streets overnight. State law. Associations may not prohibit the display of the United States flag, state flag, or military flags, subject to reasonable placement and size restrictions. Covenants. Only HOA-approved flag designs and mounting locations permitted. No flags taller than entry light fixtures. No more than one flag. State law. Protections for tenants for extended family occupancy. For reasonable accommodation of disabilities. Covenants occupancy limits that didn't track with building code. Quiet hours written so broadly they could apply to a crying baby. Rules about vehicle colors that read like someone thought red paint caused crime? I'd seen bad policy before. I'd arrested people for obeying rules some supervisor made up that had no basis in law. This was the same pattern in a different costume. I highlighted Karen's favorite section, Covenant 7.4, and wrote preempted in the margin in big block letters. Then I called the city. Attorney Samir Patel had been a prosecutor. Before taking the city attorney job, we'd tried cases together when I was a lieutenant. He'd always enjoyed a good fight, especially when a bully was involved. "Alina," he said when he picked up, "settled into the new house yet? Or has Maplewood Heights eaten you alive?" "Somewhere in between," I said. "Got a minute for a fun question about HOA overreach?" "Always," he said. I heard papers shuffling, a keyboard clacking. "Lay it on me." I laid it all out. The truck, the letters, the statute, the county complaints, the $47,000 in fines. He didn't interrupt. When I finished, there was a low whistle on the other end of the line. "She called 911 on you." "Yes." "And then doubled down after you cited the statute." "Yes." He laughed once, sharp. "Some people really don't believe consequences apply to them." "Tell me if I'm seeing this wrong," I said. "The state exemption on government vehicles preempts their covenant, right?" "Correct. They can't enforce that section against you. Or any firefighter, EMT, or patrol officer who lives there. And the flag restrictions. Flatly illegal," he said. "The state and feds have both weighed in on that. They can regulate placement, not content. If they find anyone over military or U.S. flags, that's a problem." "What about Karen personally profiting off compliance?" I asked. "Her name is on every complaint. HOA revenue shows 47 grand in fines over 3 years. I've got a hunch that money isn't just sitting in a savings account." "Find out," he said. "If she's paying herself from fines without proper board process, that's self-dealing. If homeowners don't know about it, that's concealment. If she's using bogus violations to generate those fines, we're getting into fraud territory. How much help can you give me?" I asked. "Officially? As city attorney?" He said, "I can explain the law. I can't litigate your HOA dispute. But as a friend?" I could hear the smile in his voice. "I can tell you this. Document everything. And when you're ready, I'll happily pick up the phone when the state oversight folks call and ask, 'Is this real?'" "Good," I said, because she's not backing down. "People like that never do," he said. "They overreach until something breaks. Try not to be what breaks." The next HOA board meeting was the following Thursday at 7 p.m. in the same clubhouse where I'd watched Philip Crane-type lecture One Angry Crowd in Another Life. Maplewood Heights clubhouse was smaller, but the energy felt familiar. Soft jazz playing, folding chairs, a row of board members at a long table. Karen seated at one end with her clipboard, eyes sharp and scanning the room. I came early. Signed in as homeowner -42C and took a seat near the middle. The room filled slowly. Young families. Retirees. A few people I recognized from my walks, Shin Bob. The pest control guy whose truck I'd seen down the street. The board president. A soft-spoken man in his 60s named Harold Green. Tapped the microphone. "I'd like to call this meeting to order," he said. "We'll start with old business, then move to new business." There was an agenda printout on every chair. Nowhere on it did the words "open forum" or "homeowner comment." Pierre Samir had been very clear. State law required an opportunity for members to speak at HOA meetings for at least a few minutes. Even if it wasn't convenient, I waited. Through the landscaping contract discussion. Through a debate about pool hours. Through Karen's report on recent compliance successes, where she mentioned another commercial vehicle violation under review, without looking in my direction. When Harold moved to adjourn, I stood up. "Mr. Green," I said, projecting just enough to carry, but not enough to sound like I was giving a briefing. "State property code requires an open comment period for members." "I'd like to speak." Karen turned, already scowling. "Compliance matters are handled by the board, not residents." "I'm not asking about compliance process," I said. "I'm invoking my right to address the board under statute number." I held up the printed page with the relevant section highlighted. You're required to allow it. Harold looked at Karen, then at the paper. I could see the calculation in his eyes, the balance between keeping his compliance officer happy and not getting the HOA sued. We can allow 3 minutes, he said. Please keep your comments brief, Karen hissed, Harold under her breath. He ignored her. Thank you, I said. I walked to the front, set my folder on the table facing the board, took out 3 pages. What I didn't do was raise my voice. I'm Alina Martinez, I began. I live on Birch Court. I'm also the county's chief of police. But I'm here tonight as a homeowner. That got a ripple. Heads turned. A few people straightened in their chairs. 2 weeks ago, I continued, I parked my department-issued vehicle in my driveway after a 14-hour shift. Within 10 minutes, I received a confrontation in my driveway, and shortly after, a violation notice citing Covenant 7.4. I tapped the binder. It classifies my truck as a commercial vehicle. Karen folded her arms. You are not allowed to disclose compliance actions in public session, Karen, Harold said quietly. Let her finish. I slid the state statute forward. Under statute number, homeowner associations in this state may not enforce restrictive covenants that prohibit the parking of government-owned vehicles assigned to public safety personnel. The law specifically mentions law enforcement, firefighting, and emergency medical services. I met Harold's eyes, then each board member's in turn. I am a public safety employee, I said. This is a government vehicle. The fines I've been threatened with are legally unenforceable. A murmur went through the room. Karen leaned forward. Everyone follows the same rules here, she snapped. You are not special because of your job. The issue isn't whether I'm special, I said. The issue is whether your covenants conflict with state law. When they do, state law wins. You don't get to decide that, Karen said. I've been compliance officer for 8 years. I know the law better than you. I didn't look at her. I kept my eyes on the board. I enforce the law for a living, I said calmly, every day. I take people's freedom away when statutes require it. I sign off on charges. I testify under oath. If I misinterpret the law, people get hurt. So I make sure I don't. The room went quiet. My request is simple, I said. Remove the alleged commercial vehicle violation from my record. Withdraw the fines. Update your policies to reflect the state exemption for government vehicles. And review any past enforcement actions that may have violated the same statute. Harold looked at the papers again. His fingers tightened on the edge of the table. Karen jumped in before he could speak. If we start making exceptions for one person, we have to do it for everyone, she said. We have rules for a reason. If we let trucks like that stay, the neighborhood goes downhill. It's not an exception, I said. It's compliance. You can't enforce illegal covenants. Karen slammed her palm on the table. If you didn't want to follow the rules, you shouldn't have moved into a deed-restricted community. If you wanted to write your own laws, I said softly, you should have run for the state legislature, not the HOA board. A few quiet laughs broke out in the back. Jen's shoulders shook behind her hand. Harold held up his hands. That's enough, he said. We will. Review this matter with counsel. Fines start tomorrow, according to your last letter, I said. I'd appreciate an answer before you attempt to lien my property. Fines are non-negotiable once assessed, Karen said. Police chief or not, you'll follow HOA rules or face consequences like everyone else. 2 board members exchanged a look. One of them, middle-aged woman with tired eyes and a name tag that said secretary, shifted her chair back slightly, like she wanted distance from Karen's blast radius. Harold cleared his throat. We'll take it under advisement, he said. Thank you for your comments. It was an answer. But the room had heard enough. As I turned to go back to my seat, Bob caught my eye. Nodded once. After the meeting, the secretary and the vice president both quietly handed Harold their resignation letters. I knew because one of them slipped and dropped hers in the hallway trash can, where Jen fished it out and snapped a photo. Liability concerns, the letter said. I do not wish to be associated with potential legal violations. The board was down to Harold, one other member, and Karen. The house of cards was wobbling. The next piece fell into place when I pulled the HOA estate filings. Most people didn't know you could look up corporate documents online. Articles of incorporation, annual reports, registered agent information. Buried in the attachments to Maplewood Heights' latest annual report was a contract. Compliance Management Services Agreement, it read at the top. Contracting party, Maplewood Heights Homeowners Association, service provider, Holt Compliance Services, LLC. I stared at the name. Holt, Karen's last name. The contract laid it out in black and white. Holt. Compliance Services would manage all HOA covenant enforcement, issue violation notices, and administer fine collection. Compensation, $75 per hour plus. A performance bonus equal to 75% of all fines collected each quarter. I did the math, $40,000-$7,000 in fines over 3 years. 75% of that was about $35,000, $30,000-$5,000. Paid from HOA fines to a company owned by the person deciding what was a violation. Self-dealing didn't begin to cover it. I sent the contract to Samir with a single line. Is this as bad as it looks? He called me 5 minutes later. It's his textbook conflict of interest, he said. She approved a contract with her own company. If homeowners didn't get a clear, separate vote on this, that's a breach of fiduciary duty at minimum. And the performance bonus? I asked. He snorted. So the more she fines people, the more she gets paid. That incentivizes her to create violations. Given that most of her fines are legally questionable, we're looking at a very interesting pattern. Interesting how? Interesting, like the kind state regulators write reports about, he said. Keep digging. And start talking to people she's hurt. The more victims willing to go on record, the better. I started with the ones I already knew. Will you go on record if it comes to that? I asked Bob on his porch the evening after the board meeting. Not just with me. With investigators. Maybe the state HOA oversight board. He watched his dog nose around the flower beds. You think they'll actually listen? Yes, I said. Because this isn't just about bad manners. It's about money taken under false pretenses. And now there are statutes and contracts and bank records attached. He nodded slowly. Then yeah, I'll talk. She took $800 from me, I didn't. And I want it back. Jen said the same when I caught her by her mailbox. So did the pest control tech down the street. So did two families I hadn't met yet, who'd gotten fined for flag displays that clearly fell under state protection. 5 homeowners agreed without hesitation. I thought I was alone, one of them said. I thought it was just me she had it out for. She picks people she thinks won't fight, I said. That was her mistake. You, the woman said, half laughing. Calling 911 on a cop is one kind of mistake, I said. Calling 911 on the police chief is another. Karen made her own next move, a week after the board meeting. The county sheriff called and asked me to stop by his office. We'd worked together for years. He'd been part of the interview panel that hired me as chief. His voice on the phone was neutral, but I heard something underneath it. Got a minute? He asked when I stepped into his office. For you? Always, I said. What's up? He leaned back in his chair, steepled his fingers, and slid a manila folder across the desk. Formal citizen complaint, he said. Filed with my office, against you. I opened the folder. Complainant, Karen Holt. Allegation, abuse of position. Intimidation of HOA officials. Misuse of law enforcement authority to avoid compliance with community rules. The narrative section was 3 pages. I skimmed. She accused me of threatening her with my title, of interfering with 911 operations, of using insider knowledge to manipulate code enforcement, of creating a hostile environment at the HOA meeting. The words bully, corrupt, and above the law showed up multiple times. She's good at paperwork, I said. I'll give her that. She's very angry that you embarrassed her in a public meeting, the sheriff said. And she believes deeply that she's the hero of this story. He tapped the complaint. I'm required to open an inquiry when we get something like this. You know that. I do, I said. You want my documentation now or later? Now, he said, because between you and me, she just made a huge mistake. I took a breath, slid my own folder out of my bag. Letters, statutes, county complaint logs, the compliance contract, notes from my conversations with homeowners, photos of my truck, the 911 call log showing no emergency. I laid it all out on his desk. She picked the wrong person, he said. Flipping through the stack, she's been doing this to people who don't have rank or lawyers, I said. They paid because it was easier than fighting. I'm not interested in easy, he nodded. I'll have internal affairs review the complaint and your documentation, but I'm not worried about you on this one. Who are you worried about? I asked. He closed the folder. Karen Holt. He was right up until then. Karen had been playing in a sandbox. She thought she owned threat letters, bogus fines, intimidation backed by nothing but stationery. By filing a complaint with the sheriff's office, she'd stepped into a different arena, one where evidence mattered, one where misuse of authority and financial conflicts weren't just community issues, they were violations. With consequences, as I left his office, my phone buzzed with a new email. Subject line: Complaint received HOA enforcement practices. Sender: State HOA. Oversight Division, Karen. Thought she was about to see the police chief. Taken down a peg. What she didn't realize was that she'd just invited every level of oversight. She'd been skating under, straight into Maplewood Heights, and they were going to bring calculators? The sheriff called me back into his office a week later. Same manila folder. More papers inside, he said, flipping it open. Internal affairs cleared you in about 15 minutes. The rest of this, though, he shook his head. This woman just handed us a roadmap. Turned the folder so I could see. On the left, Karen's 3-page complaint. Highlights in yellow where she claimed I'd threatened her with arrest, used inside connections to cancel a legitimate 911 response, and intimidated board members into submission. On the right, my documentation, the 911 call log showing no emergency HOA complaint, and my notation. Caller advised on appropriate use of emergency services. The meeting recording where my voice never rose above conversational, where I never mentioned arrest, where Karen interrupted me more than I interrupted her. It's all provably false, the sheriff said. She accused the chief of crimes she didn't commit. That's perjury if she ever swears to it. But here's the thing, this complaint made me curious. He pulled out another set of pages. County code enforcement logs, HOA filings, bank statement summaries from the HOA account. I had my people run the numbers, he said. 127 violations in 3 years, all from the same complainant. 47,000 in fines. Then we saw the payments to Holt Compliance Services. Consulting fees, I said. Quarterly, he said. Funny thing, every quarter where fines went up, so did her consulting checks. 75% of fine revenue, straight to her LLC. He leaned back. I'm a simple man, Chief. I see a pattern like that. I call it what it is. Self-dealing, I said. Fraud, he said. And that's before the State Oversight Board saw it. The anonymous tip to the state. HOA Oversight Division hadn't been as anonymous as the email claimed. Samir had composed it with the precision of someone who'd drafted 100 indictments. It laid out everything without mentioning my name. An HOA compliance officer running her own enforcement company. Profit sharing from fines. And a suspiciously high number of complaints directed at working-class homeowners. State oversight didn't ignore patterns like that by the time I sat down with their auditor. They'd already pulled Maplewood Heights filings, contracts, and bank records. The auditor's name was Lisa Park. Late 30s, sharp suit, sharper eyes. We met in a neutral conference room at the county building. Chief Martinez, she said, shaking my hand. Thanks for making time. Happy to, I said. But like I told your office, I'm here as a homeowner.
How?
She smiled slightly. Understood. Off the record, though. Having someone who understands documentation is refreshing. She opened a laptop. The screen showed a spreadsheet that would have made Karen faint. This is a summary of Maplewood Heights enforcement activity for the last 3 years, Lisa said. Violations by type, property, date, complainant. We cross-referenced it with their financial reports. A bar graph showed compliance penalties climbing each year. Another line showed payments to Holt Compliance Services mirroring the jump. You see that spike? Lisa said, pointing to the last 4 quarters. That's when your truck showed up in her world. She upped enforcement across the board. More letters. More fines. Mostly for vehicle-related issues. Retaliatory, I said. Reactive, she agreed. She felt challenged, so she tightened the screws. But here's the problem. She clicked to another tab. None of these fines would withstand legal scrutiny. Many of the violations conflict directly with state or federal law. Flag restrictions. Government vehicle bans. Occupancy enforcement that ignores fair housing protections. Homeowners didn't know that, I said. She waved paper at them and said, "Pay or I lien your house." Lisa nodded. We interviewed 5 of them already. They all have the same story. Threatening letters, escalating fines, no clear appeal process. And all of them said the same thing about you. I raised an eyebrow. About me? They're glad you moved in, she said. Because you had the time, knowledge, and backbone to push back in a way they couldn't. The depositions were scheduled a month later. Karen seemed almost energized when she walked into the conference room. Crisp blazer, hair perfect, binder under her arm. She glared at me like we were opponents in a courtroom drama. She was sure she'd win. Her attorney, hired personally, not through HOA insurance, sat beside her. The HOA's own counsel sat at the far end of the table, looking like he wanted to melt into his chair. State oversight had subpoenaed Karen's records. My sheriff's office had provided their internal findings. Samir had a neat stack of statutes and case law at his elbow. The court reporter swore Karen in. Ms. Holt, Lisa began. How long have you served as compliance officer for Maplewood Heights? 8 years, Karen said. Chin high. I was unanimously appointed by the board. And Holt Compliance Services LLC, when was it formed? Karen's eyes flicked to her attorney. About 7 years ago? Was there a competitive bidding process for the compliance contract? Lisa asked. The board trusted my expertise, Karen said. They wanted someone who cared about the community, so no bids. It wasn't necessary, Karen said. I already knew the standards. Lisa clicked her pen. Are you aware that state law requires HOA boards to disclose conflicts of interest when awarding contracts? My relationship with the HOA was disclosed, Karen said quickly. Everyone knew I was compliance officer. Did homeowners receive a separate vote approving your compensation structure? Lisa asked. Specifically, that you would receive 75% of all fines collected? It was in the budget, Karen said. As administrative costs, line item 3B, Lisa said. Administrative compliance services, $35,000. No further detail. Homeowners didn't need the specifics, Karen snapped. They elected the board to make decisions. Lisa didn't argue. She simply turned to the next page. Let's talk about some specific homeowners, she said. Bob Harris. You fined him $1,200 over the course of a year for parking his VA medical transport van in his driveway. It was a commercial vehicle, Karen said. Our rules clearly state his van is owned by the Department of Veterans Affairs, Lisa said. You saw his paperwork? You noted it in your own file. It had a logo, Karen said. Logos are not allowed. Lisa moved on. Jen Collins. You fined her $2,000 over her florist van. It was damaging our community image, Karen said. Our covenants. Do you know that Ms. Collins had to park her van off-site after your enforcement? Lisa asked. She lost several large contracts because she couldn't make early morning deliveries. Karen's jaw tightened. That's not my responsibility. My responsibility is to uphold standards. Lisa clicked to another entry. The Nugents. You fined them $800 for an unapproved door color? It did not match the pre-approved palette, Karen said. Lisa slid a photo across the table. A perfectly beige door. This is their door, Lisa said. Taken the day of your violation. It's color code hashtag AFB1A. For the exact shade listed as sandstone in your approved palette. Karen's face flushed. It looked wrong. Did you measure it? Lisa asked. Or did you just decide it offended your personal taste? I am the compliance officer, Karen snapped. I am the standard. The silence that followed was heavy. My deposition was later that afternoon. Karen stayed. Her attorney stayed. So did the HOA counsel, Lisa Samir, and the court reporter. They swore me in, Chief Martinez, Lisa began. Can you describe your first interaction with Ms. Holt regarding your vehicle? I walked them through it. The confrontation in my driveway. The 911 call. The letters. The statute. The board meeting. Did you ever threaten Ms. Holt with arrest? Lisa asked. No. Did you ever suggest she would face criminal consequences if she did not reverse your fines? No. Did you cancel a legitimate 911 call to avoid enforcement? She asked. No, I said. I canceled a misuse of 911. There was no crime. No emergency. Ms. Holt wanted armed officers to respond to a truck she didn't like. Do you have documentation of that call? Lisa asked. Yes. I slid the printout forward. Call log recording, CAD notes. Lisa went through my file piece by piece. The complaint logs. The state statute. The contract. My notes from homeowner conversations. Why did you start documenting on day one? She asked. Because I recognized the pattern, I said. I've seen people like Ms. Holt in uniform and out of it. People who use rules as weapons, not safeguards. Documentation is the only thing that stands up when they start lying. Did your position as police chief influence your response? She asked. Yes, I said, and felt Karen's attorney perk up. It made me more careful. I knew anything I did would be scrutinized more harshly than the average homeowner. That's why I didn't lean on my badge. I leaned on the law. Why not just order her to stop? Lisa asked. Because that would have been an abuse of authority, I said. I don't get to use my position to settle personal scores, but I do get to insist that laws are followed. And I get to bring evidence to the people who enforce them. Samir looked satisfied. Karen looked like she could chew through steel. The story hit the local news a week later. Rachel Chen's byline again. Same reporter who'd written about the vineyard case over in another part of the county. Apparently, toxic HOA behavior was her beat now. HOA compliance officer profited from illegal fines. Targeted police chief, the headline read. The article laid it out in careful, sourced detail. Maplewood Heights compliance officer Karen Holt had established Holt Compliance Services, an LLC, and signed a contract paying the company 75% of all fines collected. Over 3 years, the HOA had assessed $47,000 in fines. $35,000 of that had gone directly to Karen's company as consulting fees. The article quoted homeowners Bob Jen, the new Jens by first name and initial. It quoted me briefly, sticking to the facts. I received violation notices that conflicted with state law. When I looked deeper, I found a pattern that concerned me. I documented what I saw and referred it to the appropriate authorities. It quoted the sheriff. We take misuse of 911 seriously. We also take allegations of harassment and fraud seriously, whether they come from individuals or associations. Quoted Lisa Park, the state auditor. Associations have the right to enforce valid covenants. They do not have the right to create unlawful rules or personally profit from questionable enforcement. Karen declined to comment. The HOA board issued a short statement. We are cooperating fully with state and county investigations. The comments section was brutal. Not toward me. Toward the idea of a person turning neighborly annoyance into a revenue stream. Within 48 hours, 3 regional outlets had picked up the story. A state talk radio show dedicated an hour to HOA horror stories. With Maplewood Heights as exhibit, the state attorney general's office moved faster than I expected a month after the article. They filed a civil action against Karen Holt and Holt Compliance Services that the charges read like a checklist. Unlawful self-dealing as a fiduciary. Fraudulent inducement of payment. Deceptive trade practices. Violation of state HOA transparency requirements. The complaint alleged that Karen had knowingly and willfully used her position to create, identify, and enforce questionable or unlawful violations for the primary purpose of generating fine revenue from which she personally profited. Right. It quoted the contract. It cited the complaint logs. It referenced the depositions, the audit, the homeowner testimonies. It also named Maplewood Heights HOA as a co-defendant, though, with a note that current board members are cooperating and may be treated differently than prior leadership. When the HOA's insurer saw the word fraud, they did what insurers always do. They sent a letter denying coverage for Karen's legal defense. Intentional misconduct wasn't covered. She was on her own. The same letters she'd used for years to make other people panic were now arriving in her mailbox. Only this time, she didn't get to write them. She got to read them, and for the first time in 8 years, Karen Holt was the one looking at paperwork she couldn't bully her way past. The next move wasn't mine. It belonged to the people whose job it was to enforce the laws she'd treated like suggestions, and they were just getting started. The emergency meeting notice went out on a Tuesday. All homeowners are strongly encouraged to attend, it read. No agenda details. Just a date, time, a line that made it clear something had shifted. Board will address compliance program irregularities and state audit findings. I saw it in my mailbox and felt the air change. This wasn't damage control. This was a detonation. The clubhouse was packed by the time I arrived. I'd come 15 minutes early. Still had to stand near the back. Every folding chair was full. People lined the walls. Parents with babies, retirees, young couples. The pest control guy. A woman I recognized from the next street over who had HOA reform written on a homemade shirt. Bob caught my eye from across the room and nodded. Jen stood near the side door, arms crossed, jaw tight. The energy was different than the last meeting I'd attended. Last time, people were confused, defensive, afraid to challenge authority. This time, they were angry. At the front table sat Harold Green, the board president, looking 20 years older than he had 2 months ago. Next to him, one remaining board member, retired banker named Gerald, shuffled papers. Like he was afraid they'd catch fire. Karen's seat was empty. Harold tapped the microphone. I'd like to call this meeting to order. The room didn't quiet immediately. He had to tap twice more. Thank you all for coming, he said. His voice was hoarse. I know many of you have questions. We're going to address them as clearly as we can. He took a breath, glanced at Gerald, then continued. Over the past month, the State HOA Oversight Division conducted an audit of our compliance and financial practices. The findings were troubling. He opened a folder. His hands shook slightly. In the last 3 years, Maplewood Heights assessed approximately $47,000 in fines against homeowners for covenant violations. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Those fines were collected and deposited into the HOA operating account, Harold said. What many of you may not have known is that a significant portion of those funds $30,000–$5,000 was paid to an outside contractor. Who? Someone shouted from the middle. Harold hesitated. Then Holt Compliance Services, LLC. The murmur turned into a wave of voices. That's Karen's company. Someone yelled, she paid herself. Another voice, incredulous. Harold raised his hand for quiet. The contract was approved by the previous board. The structure paid Holt Compliance Services 75% of all fine revenue as a performance incentive. The room exploded. We paid those fines. A woman near the front stood up, shaking. That's our money. She took our money. She'll fine me $800. Another voice. And she got paid for it? Harold tried to speak over the noise. The state auditor has determined that the arrangement violated multiple fiduciary standards and likely constitutes self-dealing under state law. Where is she? Someone shouted. Where's Karen? Harold's face tightened. Ms. Holt was notified of this meeting. She chose not to attend. That was a lie. I knew it was a lie, because at that exact moment, the side door opened and Karen walked in. She wasn't dressed like someone bracing for a collapse. She wore a navy blazer, white blouse, hairstyled, shoulders back, clipboard in hand. She walked to the front of the room like she owned it. "I'm here," she said loudly, cutting through the noise. "And I'm not going to sit quietly while my reputation is destroyed by baseless accusations." The room went silent. Not the respectful kind. The stunned kind. Harold looked like he'd just seen a ghost walk into a funeral. "Karen, this meeting is being run by the board. I have every right to defend myself," Karen snapped. She turned to face the crowd. "You all want to act like I'm some kind of criminal. I provided valuable services to this community for 8 years. Compliance management isn't free. You think covenant enforcement happens by magic? You got paid to fine us?" Someone shouted. "I got compensated for professional services," Karen said. "The board approved it. I filed quarterly reports. This was all documented. Did we vote on it?" Jen's voice, cutting through from the side. Karen turned toward her. "The board votes on contracts. That's how HOAs work. We're supposed to vote on expenses over $10,000. The woman in the HOA reform shirt said, standing up with a printed copy of the bylaws. "Says so right here. Section 4.2. Karen's jaw tightened. "That's for capital expenditures, not operational contracts. You made $35,000 fining your neighbors," someone else said. "And we didn't know about it. It was in the budget." Karen's voice was rising now. "Administrative costs. Line item 3B. None of you bothered to read it. Because you buried it?" Bob stood up, pointing at her. "You didn't say, 'Hey everyone, paying myself 75% of your fines.' You hid it under vague language and hoped no one would check." Karen whirled on him. "I didn't hide anything. You're just upset because I enforced rules you didn't want to follow. You fined me for a VA van?" Bob's voice cracked. "I helped disabled veterans get to medical appointments, and you called it a commercial vehicle. It had a logo. It was a government vehicle." I said. Every head turned. I was still standing near the back. Quiet until then, watching Karen's eyes locked on mine. Her face went tight with fury. "Of course," she said, voice dripping venom. "The police chief. You've been targeting me since day one because you think you're above the rules?" I didn't move. Didn't raise my voice. "I documented everything," I said. "Every letter you sent. Every fine you issued. Every threat you made. Would you like me to present it?" "You have no right," Harold cut her off. "Actually, Ms. Holt, I think the board would benefit from hearing Chief Martinez's timeline." Karen's mouth opened, closed. "This is a witch hunt." "Please," Harold said to me. "If you have documentation, we'd like to see it." I walked to the front, pulled a folder from my bag, opened it on the table. "Day 1, I said. I parked my county-issued vehicle in my driveway. Within 10 minutes, Karen confronted me and demanded I move it. When I explained it was a government vehicle, she called 911. I showed the call log, the dispatcher's notes, the recording transcript. Day 3. I received a violation notice threatening $500 fines for a vehicle explicitly exempted by state statute. Showed the statute. The letter, the date stamps. Day 7. I responded with the legal exemption. Karen escalated, threatened liens, filed a false complaint with county code enforcement, alleging I was operating an illegal business. I slid the county report forward. Inspector found no violations. Closed the complaint as unfounded. I turned to the crowd. Over the next month, I talked to other homeowners. Bob, who paid $1,200 for a VA van. Jen, who paid $2,000 for a florist van. The Nugents, who paid $800 for a door that was literally the approved color. I pulled the photos, the receipts, the violation letters. Here's the pattern, I said. Karen targeted people who worked service jobs, people who needed work vehicles, people who couldn't afford lawyers. She'll never find board members. Never find the doctor on Maple who parks his Porsche collection in the driveway. Never find the lawyer on Oak who built an unapproved gazebo. I'll let that sit. She picked people she thought wouldn't fight back, I said. And she profited every time they paid. The room was dead silent. Karen's face was red. You have poisoned this community against me because you couldn't stand being held accountable. Accountable for what? I asked. Parking legally. Following state law? You think your badge makes you special? She shouted. I think the law applies to everyone, I said, including you. Harold cleared his throat. The board has reviewed the state audit, consulted with legal counsel, and discussed this matter at length. He looked at Karen, effective immediately. Your position as compliance officer is terminated. Karen's face went white. You can't. We also vote to suspend all outstanding fines pending individual review for legal validity, Harold continued. And we are referring this matter to the State Attorney General's office and local authorities for further investigation.
Oh.
Gerald raised his hand. I second. All in favor. Harold asked. Every hand in the room went up. Not just the board. The homeowners, too. A sea of raised arms. Karen stood there, shaking. You can't do this, she said, voice breaking now. I'll sue every one of you. I'll file complaints. Your position is terminated, Harold said quietly. Please leave. For a moment, she didn't move. Just stood there, gripping her clipboard, like it was the only solid thing left in the world. Then she turned and walked toward the door. Her heels clicked on the tile, too loud in the silence. At the threshold, she stopped, turned back. You'll regret this, she said. Her voice was cold now, controlled. All of you. Then she was gone. The door swung shut behind her. No one spoke for a long moment. Then someone in the back started clapping. Slowly at first. Then others joined. Then the whole room. I didn't clap. I just stood there, watching the door, thinking about all the people who'd paid fines they didn't owe because they were too scared or too tired to fight. This wasn't revenge. This was overdue. The state charges were filed 2 weeks. Later, Karen Holt and Holt Compliance Services, LLC. Multiple counts. Theft by deception. Fraudulent business practices. Abuse of fiduciary duty. Violation of state HOA transparency laws. The Attorney General's press release was clinical. Public officials and private contractors in positions of trust must operate with integrity. When individuals exploit those positions for personal gain, they undermine community trust and violate the law. Criminal charges, not just civil, misdemeanors, but on the record. If convicted, Kieran faced up to 18 months. Fines, restitution, and a permanent ban from holding any HOA position in the state. Her attorney tried to negotiate. The AG's office wasn't interested. They had the contracts, the bank records, the testimonies, the pattern. Karen's clipboard and blazer weren't going to save her this time. She'd spent 8 years writing letters that scared people into compliance. Now she was reading letters that couldn't be argued away. And there was no appeal process for criminal statutes, consequences, the kind she used to threaten other people with, the kind she never thought would apply to her. Karen's case moved faster than I expected. Her attorney, expensive, from a firm 2 counties over, tried to delay. Filed motions, requested continuances, argued that the charges were politically motivated because his client had targeted a law enforcement official. The judge wasn't buying it. Your client profited from fines she imposed on working families, he said during a pretrial hearing I didn't attend but heard about from the prosecutor. The fact that one of those families happened to include a police chief doesn't make this political. It makes it documented. 3 weeks before trial, Karen's attorney contacted the AG's office with a plea offer. She'd plead guilty to 2 counts, fraudulent business practices and abuse of fiduciary duty. The rest would be dropped. In exchange, 18-month supervised probation, full restitution of $47,000 to the HOA, dissolution of Holt Compliance Services, and a permanent ban from serving in any HOA leadership position statewide. The prosecutor called me. Thoughts? Does she admit wrongdoing? I asked. She has to allocute in court, on the record, in front of a judge. Then I'm fine with it, I said. This was never about putting her in jail. It was about stopping her from doing it again. Restitution might take her years, the prosecutor said. Good, I said. She took years from people who couldn't fight back. She can spend years paying it back. The plea hearing was scheduled for a Thursday morning in late spring. I didn't attend the hearing. Didn't need to, but Bob did. Oh? So did Jen. So did the Nugians and 3 other families who'd been fined. Bob called me after. She cried, he said. Not like she was sorry, like she was mad she got caught. Did she allocute? I asked. Yeah, the judge made her say it out loud. I unlawfully profited from fines imposed on homeowners. I failed my fiduciary duty. I used my position for personal gain. He paused. She could barely get the words out. Good, I said. Judge told her she'd betrayed the trust of a community, Bob continued. Said people like her make everyone cynical about rules. Then he accepted the plea and told her she had 30 days to start the payment plan. What about the LLC? Dissolved within 60 days. All contracts void. She can't operate any kind of compliance business ever again. I sat with that for a moment. Karen Holt, who'd spent 8 years wielding violations like weapons, was now barred from ever holding that kind of power again. Not just in Maplewood Heights. Anywhere in the state. How'd she look? I asked. Small, Bob said. For the first time since I met her, she looked small. The HOA moved quickly after the plea. New board elections were held within a month. Harold Green stepped down, citing exhaustion. Gerald retired. 7 candidates ran, the top 3 vote-getters. Bob Harris, Jen Collins, and a retired teacher named Angela Morales, who'd been vocal during the emergency meeting. Bob became president and treasurer. Angela, secretary. Their first act, refund every fine collected under Karen's tenure. It took weeks to process. The HOA hired an independent accountant to review every violation notice, every fine issued, every payment made. Anything that conflicted with state or federal law, refunded. Anything where the process hadn't been followed, refunded. Anything questionable, refunded. Bob got his $1,200 back. Check delivered with an apology letter. Den got $2,000, same letter. Juniors got $800. The pest control tech got $500. The young couple who'd been fined for a flagpole got $300. 22 families got money back. Total refunds, $18,000. The rest of Karen's earnings went into a reserve fund earmarked for legal defense if any homeowner wanted to sue the old board personally. No one did. They just wanted their money and their peace. Didn't stop at refunds. We're rewriting the bylaws, Bob told me over coffee one Saturday morning, top to bottom. He showed me the draft. I read through it with my lawyer's eye and my cop's instinct for loopholes. Section 4. All fines over $100 require a majority board vote in an open session. Homeowners must be notified and given opportunity to appeal before fines are assessed. Section 7. No board member, officer, or contractor may personally profit from fines, violations, or compliance actions. All contracts over $5,000 require competitive bidding and membership approval. Section 9. Independent financial audit required annually. Results published to all members within 30 days of completion. And Section 12, my favorite. Government-owned vehicles assigned to law enforcement, firefighting, emergency medical services, or other public safety personnel are exempt from commercial vehicle restrictions per state statute. You wrote that one for me? I said. Bob smiled. Wrote it for anyone who serves. You just happened to be the one who made us realize we needed it. The membership voted to adopt the new bylaws, 10182. I didn't ask who the 2 no votes were. The public apology came next. Was published in the neighborhood newsletter, posted on the HOA website, and mailed to every household. The Board of Directors of Maplewood Heights Homeowners Association acknowledges that enforcement actions taken under previous leadership violated the rights and trust of multiple homeowners. Fines were improperly assessed, state and federal protections were ignored, homeowners were not given fair process or opportunity to appeal. We deeply regret the harm caused.
We have refunded all improper fines. We have reformed our processes to ensure transparency, fairness, and accountability. We are committed to being better stewards of this community. Thank you to those who came forward, who spoke up, and who held us accountable. Jen told me later that writing it had made her cry. I kept thinking about how scared I was when I got that first letter from Karen, how I thought I'd lose my house. And now I'm the treasurer writing apologies to people who felt the same way. You're fixing it, I said. That's what matters. The county took notice. Board of Supervisors passed an ordinance, the Homeowner Protection and HOA Transparency Act. It required all HOAs in the county to publish annual financial reports online, disclose all contracts over $5,000, provide a clear, written appeals process for fines, submit to random audits if homeowner complaints exceeded a threshold. The ordinance cited recent enforcement abuses as justification. They didn't name Maplewood Heights specifically, but the local paper did. County acts after HOA scandal, the headline read. I got a call from the county administrator asking if I'd be willing to speak at the signing ceremony. I declined. This isn't about me, I said. It's about the people who got hurt and the system that let it happen. Give the mic to Bob or Jen. They gave it to Bob. He spoke for 3 minutes about losing $800 he couldn't afford and parking his van at a church 2 miles away for a year. Nobody should have to go through that, he said. And now, because of this ordinance, fewer people will. The supervisors applauded. The press took photos. Bob looked uncomfortable but proud. I watched the live stream from my office and felt something settle in my chest. Not victory, just rightness. My truck stayed in the driveway. No letters, no fines. No clipboard-wielding enforcers photographing it at dawn. Just a county-issued vehicle parked where it belonged, exactly as state law allowed. Sometimes neighbors would stop and chat when I was washing it, ask how work was going. Thank me, awkwardly, for standing up to her. I always said the same thing. I just read the statute. The law did the rest. One afternoon, a kid from down the street, maybe 10 years old, rode his bike past, stopped, and stared. Is that really a cop car, he asked. Police truck? I said. Yep, cool, he said. My mom says you're a hero. I almost laughed. Your mom's very kind. I'm just someone who didn't like getting bad letters. He thought about that. My mom got bad letters too, before you moved here. She did? Yeah. The mean lady said our trampoline was too big. We had to take it down. He kicked at the pavement. It wasn't even that big. I didn't know what to say to that, so I just nodded. You can put it back up now, I said, if you want. New rules. His face lit up. He pedaled off yelling, Mom, WE can get the trampoline back. Small things. But small things mattered. I used the case in training 6 months later. I was invited to speak at the State Police Academy's leadership seminar. Ethics, Authority, and Documentation was the session title. I opened with a question. How many of you have dealt with someone who believed their position made them untouchable? Every hand went up. Karen Holt believed she was untouchable, I said. 8 years as compliance officer. $35,000 in profit? 27 violations filed, most of them bogus. She targeted people who couldn't fight back. I showed them the letters. The 9/11 call log. The contracts. The timeline. She made one mistake, I said. She targeted someone who knew how to document. I walked them through it. Day 1. Day 3. Day 7. The spreadsheet. Public records request. The patterns. This case teaches 3 things, I said. 1. Document everything, even when you're the victim. Especially when you're the victim. 2. Abusers rely on people not knowing their rights. When you know the law, you take their power away. 3. Authority without accountability is just bullying with a title. A lieutenant in the back raised his hand. Chief, why didn't you just arrest her on day 1 for misuse of 9101? Because that would have been about me, I said. I wanted it to be about the system, about everyone she'd hurt. Arresting her would have been satisfying. Letting the process work meant 22 families got refunds, and the county passed an ordinance. Which one matters more? The room was quiet. Sometimes the slow route is the right route, I said. Not because it feels good. Because it lasts. Karen moved out of state 4 months after her plea. I heard it from Jen, who heard it from a neighbor who saw the moving truck. Didn't say goodbye to anyone, Jen said. Just? Good, I said. You think she learned anything? Jen asked. I think she learned not to get caught, I said. Whether she learned why it was wrong? I doubt it. Karen's house sold within a month. The new owners were a young couple with a toddler and a dog. They introduced themselves to Bob, asked about the neighborhood, seemed genuinely nice. Any HOA drama we should know about? The husband asked. Bob smiled. Not anymore. 1 year after I'd parked my truck in the driveway for the first time, Maplewood Heights threw a block party, not official. Just neighbors deciding to grill hot dogs, set up bounce houses, and close off the street for an afternoon. I'm pretty sure it was Jen, had made a sign and duct taped it to my truck's tailgate. It read, Chief's parking spot, officially approved. I saw it when I came outside with a bowl of potato salad. Bob was standing nearby, grinning. You like it? I shook my head, laughing despite myself. You're all ridiculous? You earned it, he said. I parked in my driveway, I said. That's not heroic. That's just existing. You fought back? Jen said, walking up with a plate of cookies. The rest of us were too scared. You weren't. I was terrified, I said. I just hid it better. The party went until sunset. Kids ran through sprinklers. Adults talked across lawn chairs. Someone set up a speaker and played music too loudly, and no one cared. At one point I stood near my truck, decorated with its ridiculous sign, and looked around. Bob laughing with neighbors he used to avoid, Jen organizing a bake sale fundraiser for the community park, Angela helping a kid fix a bike chain. A neighborhood that had been ruled by fear and fines was now just a neighborhood. People living, laughing, existing without looking over their shoulders. And my truck sat in the driveway where it belonged. No threats, no letters, no consequences. Just a vehicle. Parked legally, like it always should have been. Sometimes justice doesn't roar, sometimes it just parks in the driveway and refuses to move. And that's enough. 2 years after the block party, I found myself sitting across from Officer Danny Reyes in my office. 24 years old, fresh from the academy, sharp, eager, and still figuring out the difference between authority and leadership. He'd asked to meet after attending my seminar on ethics and documentation. Now he sat with a notebook open, pen ready, looking at me like I had answers he hadn't learned yet. Chief, he said, I've been thinking about the HOA case you presented, the one with the compliance officer who targeted you. Karen Holt, I said. What about it? You had the authority to shut her down on day one, he said. Misuse of 911. False complaint? Harassment? You could have arrested her, or at least scared her off. Why didn't you? I leaned back in my chair. It was a good question. The kind that meant he was thinking beyond the badge. Because authority without accountability is tyranny, I said. If I'd used my position to shut her down personally, I would have been no different than she was. But she was breaking the law, Danny said. She was, I agreed. And the law needed to handle her. Not me. Not as a cop with a grudge. As a system with a process. Danny frowned, still working through it. But you're the police chief. You are the system. No, I said. I'm part of it. And if I'd stepped outside my role as a homeowner, to crush her using my role as chief, I would have been abusing my authority the same way she abused hers. I pulled the case file from my desk. Still had it. Probably always would. Every move I made was something any homeowner could have made, I said. I read the statute. I documented violations. I filed complaints through proper channels. I didn't threaten her with arrest. I didn't show up in uniform. I didn't leverage my position. That must have been hard, Danny said. It was, I admitted. Every time she sent another letter, every time she lied to the board, I wanted to walk up to her door in full uniform and remind her who she was messing with. Why didn't you? Because that's not justice, I said. That's revenge. And revenge doesn't fix systems. It just trades one bully for another. Danny nodded slowly. So you let the process work. I made the process work, I said. By documenting everything, by following the rules, by showing that even someone with authority could be held accountable when they broke them. I handed him the file. 22 families got refunds. The county passed a transparency ordinance. Karen's banned from HOA service statewide. That doesn't happen if I arrest her on day one. That happens because the system had time to see the full pattern. Danny flipped through the pages, the letters, the timeline, the 91 log. You turned yourself into evidence, he said. I was already evidence, I said. I just made sure it was documented. The case had rippled further than I'd expected. 6 months after Karen's plea, a state representative from 2 counties over contacted me. She'd read about the case in the news and wanted to discuss HOA reform legislation. Your situation exposed gaps in state law, she said during our call. HOAs can impose fines with almost no oversight. I want to change that. The bill she drafted, House Bill 847, limited HOA fine authority, required independent audits for associations over 50 homes, and mandated clear appeals processes, added State versus Holt in the preamble. The bill passed the following session, signed into law. Effective statewide. 3 other counties adopted transparency ordinances modeled on ours. A national HOA reform group used Karen's case in their toolkit as an example of accountability through documentation. I got interview requests from legal blogs, community advocacy groups, even a podcast about standing up to petty tyrants. I declined most of them. This was never about me being a hero. It was about a system that worked when people forced it to. I met Bob for coffee on a Saturday morning that fall. Place? Not a cafe? He'd invited me over after we ran into each other at the hardware store. Got something I've been meaning to ask you? He said. We sat on his back deck. The VA van was parked in the driveway exactly where it belonged. No letters, no threats, no clipboard-wielding enforcers. You could have crushed her immediately, Bob said, handing me a mug. Day 1. You're the chief of police. She called 911 on you. Why didn't you just end it? I took a sip. Good coffee. Strong. Because it wasn't just about me, I said. You'd been dealing with her for a year before I moved in. Jen had been harassed for 2 years. The Newans, the pest control guy, all the others. She'd been targeting people like you because she thought you couldn't fight back. Bob nodded, jaw tight. If I'd shut her down using my badge, I continued, you all would have still been victims. You would have still believed you were powerless. I needed you to see that the system could work for everyone, not just people with authority. You wanted us to see justice? Bob said quietly. I wanted you to be part of it, I said. You testified. You stood up at that meeting. You ran for the board. That's not something I could have done for you. That's something you did because you saw it was possible. Bob stared into his mug. I never thought about it that way. Karen spent 8 years convincing people like you that they didn't matter, I said. That rules were whatever she said they were. I didn't want to beat her. I wanted to prove her wrong. Bob looked up. His eyes were wet. You did. We sat there in the quiet for a while. The neighborhood around us was different now. Kids on bikes, people mowing lawns, someone down the street working on a car in their driveway, no fear of fines, no paranoia about clipboards. You know the board's talking about adding a veteran vehicle exemption to the bylaws? Bob said. Explicit protection for anyone who drives for VA services. I heard, I said. Good call. She wants to make sure no one else goes through what I did. She's good at the job, I said. You both are. Bob smiled. Funny how that works. A year ago, I was hiding my van at a church. Now I'm president of the HOA that fined me for it. Accountability changes things, I said. When people see it work, they start believing in it again. I spent a lot of evenings on my porch that year, just sitting, watching the neighborhood. My truck parked in the driveway like it had been since day 1. Karen's old house had sold twice since she left. The current owners were a young couple with a toddler, Maria and Justin. They'd moved in 3 months ago. Maria saw me one evening and waved. "Chief Martinez?" "That's me," I said. She walked over, toddler on her hip. "We heard about what happened here with the previous compliance officer." I tensed slightly. "What did you hear?" "That she was not great," Maria said carefully. "And that you helped stop it." "A lot of people helped stop it," I said. "I just had good documentation." "Well," Maria said, "we're grateful." Justin was worried when he saw the HOA had a history of aggressive enforcement, but everyone we've talked to says it's different now. "It is," I said. "New board, new rules. Fair process? Good," she said. Relief in her voice. "We've got a work truck. Justin's a plumber. We were worried we'd have to park it off-site." "You won't," I said. "Bylaws explicitly allow work vehicles now. As long as it's not commercial signage over a certain size, you're fine." Her face lit up. "Really? Really?" I said. "And if anyone gives you trouble, you've got an appeals process and a board that actually listens." She thanked me and headed back to her house. I watched her go, thinking about how normal that conversation was now. No fear, no anxiety. Just a neighbor asking a question and getting a straight answer. That's what accountability looked like. Not dramatic, not loud, just normal. One afternoon in late spring, I was walking to my truck in uniform, heading to a community meeting. Standard day. A kid from down the street, maybe 8 years old, rode his bike past, then circled back. He stopped a few feet away, staring. "Are you really the police chief?" he asked. "Whoa," he said, eyes wide. "My mom says you're a hero." I crouched down to his level. "Your mom's very nice, but I'm not a hero. She says you stopped the mean lady who made people pay money they didn't owe." "I didn't stop her alone," I said. "A lot of people work together to fix a problem. I just happened to be the one who started documenting it." He thought about that. "What's documenting?" "Writing things down," I said. "Keeping records. So when someone says something that isn't true, you can prove what really happened." "Like evidence?" he asked. "Exactly like evidence," I said. He grinned. "That's cool. I'm going to start documenting stuff." I laughed. "Good idea. Just make sure you're documenting the truth, not just what you want to be true." "Okay," he said. Then, after a pause, "Do you like being the police chief?" "Most days," I said. "Especially when I get to help people or teach them how to help themselves." "My mom says you believe rules should be fair." "I do," I said. "Rules are supposed to protect people, not hurt them. And they're supposed to apply to everyone, even the people enforcing them." He nodded seriously like he was memorizing it. Then he pedaled off, yelling back, "Thanks, Chief!" I stood there for a moment, watching him ride away. Not that I was a hero. Not that I'd won some battle. But that a kid in this neighborhood could grow up believing rules were fair. That authority figures could be trusted. That accountability wasn't just a word. It was a practice. Karen had spent 8 years teaching people the opposite. That rules were weapons. That authority was untouchable. That fighting back was futile. It had taken 2 years to undo that damage, and it wasn't fully undone. Probably never would be. But it was better. And better was enough. I climbed into my truck and started the engine. Somewhere in another state, Karen Holt was living a life where she couldn't hold power over anyone anymore, couldn't weaponize rules, couldn't profit from fear, and stopped. Not by force, not by revenge, by the same thing she'd ignored for 8 years, the law. And the people willing to document it? I backed out of my driveway, legally, as always, and headed toward the station. My truck stayed parked where it belonged. My neighbors waved as I passed. The HOA ran fairly and transparently. Justice didn't always roar. Dated sometimes it just parked in the driveway and refused to move. And when the system finally caught up, it didn't need to roar either. It just worked. Quietly. Correctly. Accountably. The way it was always supposed to.